Good morning. Happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday, right? I think. Weather's warming up. I hear the birds chirping outside even though it's still dark. And in honor of my friend having her baby last night and me being 5 months pregnant, today I thought I would chat a little bit about how our microbiota gets developed in childhood and how we foster our kids. I think it's important to talk about in our culture with more and more cesarean sections. I think 1 in 3 births is the number thrown around of C-sections, and more women choosing not to breastfeed. So I think it's good to know, even for the guys, I think it's good for you to know too, when we are little tiny babies in our mother's stomach, we're mostly sterile. We don't really have a gut microbiome yet or a microbiota in our body at all. And around 38 weeks of pregnancy, this really exciting thing happens where the microbiota in the vaginal canal, our microbiota all over our body is different. We have a microbiome in our mouth, on our hair, on our skin. On our skin is mostly staph. We have a vaginal microbiota too, and that just colonized differently. So around 38 weeks of pregnancy, the mother's microbiota there vaginally starts to look more like the microbiota in her colon, in her large intestine, which is super interesting because your body is literally getting ready to best pass on the correct bugs to your baby. And I think that is really cool. So when the baby passes through the birth canal and a vaginal birth, that's the first time really the baby's introduced to microbiome. That's the first time it has the opportunity to become colonized. And when you have a cesarean section, they find in studies that the microbiome of the baby isn't full of that good stuff that the mother would have given that turned into her colon microbiota that she was getting ready to pass on to the baby. It's more like staph from the skin of the mom and the nurses and things like that. So right away, the baby's not off to the most optimal start when it comes to allergies, chronic disease, because that initial colonization wasn't there. What they are doing lately in emergency C-sections, the last I heard, this wasn't exactly scientifically proven or studied, but I know that the top scientists in the field that really study this are doing it anyway because they know how beneficial it is they're taking swabs of the vaginal canal and kind of bathing the baby in it, in vaginal juices after a cesarean section, which sounds glorious, but birth is pretty gruesome in itself. So and they're colonizing the baby that way, is kind of trying to replicate what would have happened if they went through the birth canal in the instance of like an emergency C-section where you have no choice. But if you have a choice, definitely the best bet for setting the baby up for life is a vaginal delivery. So that's the initial time the baby gets colonized with the good gut bacteria. And then, of course, there's breastfeeding. And breastfeeding is really interesting. Breast milk is really interesting. The components, which I could probably do a whole separate video on the good stuff in breast milk. But, I mean, not only does breastfeeding itself, like mouth to skin, have benefits because the mother's receptors can pick up what exactly the baby needs. and as far as immune cells go, and create those and then make them and then put it in the food to give to the baby, which is, it's amazing. But also there is HMOs in human breast milk, which is human milk oligosaccharides. And for a long time, the scientific community didn't know what they did. Like, why are these HMOs in there? The baby can't eat them. The baby can't digest them. There's no point in it. So obviously there's nothing like that in formula. I don't think it can be replicated as of now, and they didn't know the purpose of it. It wasn't until recently that they figured out that it's actually food for the microbiome. It's food for the bacteria in the gut, and HMOs help the gut microbiome thrive. So literally the mom puts all this energy into making this substance in the milk that's not even food for the baby. It's food for the microbiome of the baby, which just blows my mind. So that's two things that just from the jump colonized the gut of the baby. And we live in a time where people like to say, fed is best, because people were saying breast is best for a long time. And Rhonda Patrick has a really, really detailed, extensive video on the biology of breast milk, which if you're interested, I highly, highly recommend. But this is not to take anything away from moms that can't breastfeed. But I think really how she likes to say it is fed is fundamental. Fed is not best. Fed is fundamental. Feeding your baby is obviously the most important part. But if you're talking about best and you're talking about hierarchy, there is no more perfect food in the world than colostrum and human breast milk for human. So, at the end of the day, we have to do the best that we can. That's all another conversation. But scientifically speaking, if you can, you should breastfeed your baby. And then, so that's 2 out of the 3 things they talk about. I'm going to do a whole nother video on things that destroy the gut microbiome, but antibiotics are the thing that you should try to avoid in your infant, because it'll obliterate the start of the colonization of the gut. So there's vaginal delivery, breastfeeding, and avoidance of antibiotics. The other thing that helps you develop your microbiome is dirt. A child's microbiome is fully developed or fully colonized, basically like the same number of organisms that an adult gut microbiome has by the time they're age 2 to 3. So about the age of my daughter right now. And during that time, you want them to be exposed to dirt and pet dander and all sorts of stuff that we traditionally found was like yucky or gross. It's a pretty old study now, but the study where they figured this out was they took they studied the children from affluent families who had very clean, sterile environments, and they looked at children from poorer families that didn't prioritize cleanliness in the home so much, and the kids that were growing up in the less than sterile environment were having better health outcomes in regards to allergies, autoimmune diseases, especially if there was more than one children in the house. Like if they're passing around their snot and their dirt and their germs and all the gross things that we have to deal with as parents, it's actually really beneficial. Obviously, sometimes there's a need for sterilization. It depends where you are, so they use the example of if you drop a pacifier on a hospital floor, you probably want to sterilize it. You probably want to wipe it off. But if you drop it on your own floor in your own home, then don't worry about it so much. I'm not a big fan of pacifiers, but that's the example that the scientists used. So you have to use your judgment, know where you are, know what kind of traffic there is. I know those types of health outcomes were a lot better when kids were growing up on farms. So even on farms with animals and feces and all that fun stuff, health outcomes are better than when people started to go to more of an industrial type of living. So that's basically how your gut microbiome is colonized. You can still change and colonize your gut as you get older. It just takes longer and is harder because you have to feed your gut microbiome the right things, possibly introducing a probiotic, which I hope to get a video out on soon. And it takes time. It's not something that happens quickly because when we're adults, all those attachment sites basically are taken up already by bacteria, and to kind of move them out of the way and replace them with good bacteria and things that are nourishing our body and helping us with chronic illness takes time. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Happy Tuesday. Love you. Bye.